The story of Moses and the people of Israel crossing the Red Sea is one of those mountaintop stories that we find in the Old Testament. This event, the crossing of the Red Sea, also known as the Exodus event, is and was a defining moment in Israel's history, and even today is considered sort of the defining moment for the people of God, the Hebrew people, the people of Israel. So there are 3 points that I would want to make as we think about this story. You're going to find the story beginning in Exodus chapter 13, verse 17, and then going through the end of chapter 14, verse 31. Included in that story is the story of the people actually leaving where they have been living in Egypt and heading to the Red Sea. And while they're on that initial journey, God is revealing himself and guiding them through these pillars, a pillar of cloud during the day and a pillar of fire at night. And one of the points I would make as you think about teaching this story to kids is that these pillars demonstrate God's direction. They reveal his direction and his presence as they're going along. So his direction, his revelation, and his presence are 2 fundamental elements of biblical theology. We serve a God, we love a God, we honor a God who has revealed himself, and a God who is present. He's not some distant God out there. He's not a silent God. He is there and he is speaking to us. He is not silent. So that's one really important point to make as you think about this story. A second point I would make is that this event was specifically orchestrated. When you read it and look at the text, God specifically orchestrates it in order to create a showdown between himself and the Egyptians under Pharaoh. He even has the people backtrack a little bit specifically in order to communicate to Pharaoh that the people of Israel were confused and lost, which then tempted or prodded Pharaoh to come out and pursue the Israelites. And all this was done because God specifically wanted to demonstrate his power. He wanted the Egyptians to know he was God, and he wanted the Israelites to believe that he was capable of delivering them and accomplishing his purposes in them, through them, and for them. So that's an important point to make, that God orchestrated this whole thing for his honor and glory. And you can see that in chapter 14 in 2 or 3 places. Another bottom line point I would want you to make or encourage you to make as you think about teaching this story is that in performing this miracle of the people of God crossing the Red Sea, the parting of the Red Sea, crossing over on dry land, and then the water coming back to consume the Egyptians, the point here, or one of the main points that needs to be brought out, is that God, the God of the Bible, is the sovereign Lord over all people, whether they are Egyptians oppressing the people of God, or whether it's the people of God themselves. God is Lord over all of them. He is Lord over anyone who will stand in his way and in the way of his people, or he's the Lord of anyone who will bow his knee or her knee before him. He specifically chooses the Israelites and makes them his people, but he loves and he is the Lord over all people. And that's a really important point to make in this story of the crossing of the Red Sea. One final thing I would point out, and this isn't a highlight as much as it is sort of a point of interest, is that this story, like many stories, but this story in particular, is told in such a way and recorded in such a way that it heightens the drama of the story, the drama of the event. And that just reminds us that these were a storytelling people. The Hebrew people had been slaves. Many of them, if not most of them, could not read or write. And consequently, their history and entertainment, it all revolved around the telling of stories. So this story was told in a really dramatic way that you can imagine a mom telling her kids at bedtime, or a master storyteller gathering the people around a campfire and telling the story. And it's just a good reminder that these stories within the book of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, these stories were intended to be for a storytelling people. So, good luck on teaching this story. I hope this helps.